All right, we're going to talk about Module 2 in English 111. So this is the overview video for that. Give me just a moment here to share my screen. Okay, so here we are in Module 2. Module 2 is about the foundations of writing. So in Module 1, you did write a discussion board, and we left out a lot of the basic conventions of writing that you need to be able to use in a college course. And so this module deals with a lot of those basic foundational elements of writing. So you'll have a bunch of readings to look at and go through. There's things about the purpose of an introduction, what a thesis statement is, how to write a paragraph, etc., what revision is, and citation. And the idea is that you will read these sources and then you will use them when you write about the issue of academic integrity, particularly relating to plagiarism and plagiarism committed with the use of generative AI, things like ChatGPT, Claude, Bard, which is actually now called Gemini at the time of this filming, and so forth. So you're going to have a lot of reading to do. You should read these sources to give yourself a better understanding of them, as well as these resources. Now, I'm going to focus on two readings, the artificial intelligence reading and the New York lawyer sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT sources in a legal brief reading. Those are the ones I'm going to focus on in just a moment here. But again, the idea is that you're going to review the sources about the basics of writing and then use them as you write about the ethics that are involved, the ethical issues that are involved with plagiarism, and with plagiarism particularly with AI. So let me close the intro. You'll see that I've got a bunch of links here for you about how to set up your paper in MLA style in either Word or Google Docs. And these will work for you. They walk you through it step by step, and you can do it manually that way. However, I'm going to show you a cheat, essentially, in Google Docs. And you all have access to Google Docs because you all have a Fable Tech email account. So I actually recommend using Google Docs because I think that, for one thing, it helps students keep from losing their work. A lot of times students lose work when they're trying to save it to their computer and various things. It also can make it easy to share it with me if you want me to review it beforehand. But you first need to be able to get access to your Fable Tech email. And so you can just type FTCC in Google, pull up the Fable Tech website. You go to My FTCC, and if you scroll down a little bit, you get to choose the student email, and you log into your student email. Now, it gives me a server error because I'm not a student, but you are able to input things to log in your email, which will look something kind of like this. To get to Google Docs, you click on the little Rubik's Cube, which is Google Apps, and then you find the one that says Docs, and you click on it. And before you go anywhere, yours FTCC one might have something up here that says General, and you might click on that, and you might be able to see this Report MLA up towards the top. If you're using your personal Gmail account, for example, which is actually what I'm doing at the moment because my instructor Fable Tech email account is totally different from the student one, then you might need to click on this template gallery. And you see then it gives you categories of different kinds of documents like resumes and letters. If you scroll down to where you find the education category, education, and then you choose the one that says Report MLA, and you click on it. And look at this. It sets up the document for you in MLA style without you having to do a bunch of stuff manually and taking time every time to do it. There are a couple of changes that you do need to make. For example, in the header, if you double click, you then want to type your actual last name. before the page number and a space. Don't type the words your last name, actually type your last name. If your last name is Smith, type Smith and then a space. If your last name is Johnson, type Johnson and a space before that page number. Then you'll fill in your first and last name here. You'll give my name here. The subject name is just ENG 111, and then you'll fill in the date, okay? We'll get rid of all this stuff here in a moment, but if you scroll then down to the bottom, you see it also tries to give you some information or a formula rather for your works cited entries. And so you're going to have to create works cited entries for your sources that you use in this paper. And you'll also have to do in-text citations. So there's a lot going on in Module 2, and I'm going to try and break this down for you a bit step by step. So let's come back then. Sorry. If we click on Journal 2-1, Thinking About Academic Integrity, let's read what the assignment description says. In this journal assignment, you will demonstrate what you've learned about composing thorough paragraphs and citing sources. You will discuss what you've learned about academic integrity, especially as it relates to acknowledging sources, issues with plagiarism, and ethical concerns regarding the use of generative AI. So you're going to answer these question prompts in an MLA-styled document, like the one that we just generated. You need to address some aspect of all the module readings. It's a minimum of 250 words. Again, you're probably going to have to write substantially more to do this well. Format your document in MLA style. Include at least one in-text citation in MLA style from 2 different sources. And write a works cited page. Okay, so you'll read this stuff and get an idea of what plagiarism is and how to cite sources, and the generative AI stuff are these 2 in the middle. And here's some other resources. Now, I took the time, again, to print this article, Artificial Intelligence, a Tool or a Threat to Art and Writing. In this article, New York lawyers sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT sources in legal brief. I printed them and I annotated them. I think you guys can only see my screen and can't see me, but I've got all kinds of writing all over my pages. And like I said for Module 1, if you don't have access to a printer, that's fine. You can take notes in a notebook, or you can type in a Word document or a Google Doc. But these questions are all about ethical issues with plagiarism and AI. So when I read these, and I recommend that you do the same, I annotated for a couple things. First, I annotated to see different points of view that people have that relate to using AI. For example, in the New York lawyers article, we have the judge's point of view, we have the attorney's point of view, and we even have the other attorney's points of view about whether AI can be used in a courtroom to present like legal information. So I annotate first for different points of view. And in the second article, which was the one about whether artificial intelligence is a tool or a threat to art and writing, I annotated for different points of view that people have on that. I also annotated for examples of ethical problems and the consequences that resulted from those ethical problems. So consequences in the attorney case, in the legal case, was there was a fine that was imposed. There was the case got dismissed because of the improper use of AI to generate information that was actually fake. And so you want to go through these articles, and I recommend you take notes or annotate again for those 3 things. Different points of view people have about it, ethical problems, and the consequences of those problems. Then you want to come back and, using the skill set that you read about in terms of plagiarism and citing things and everything, you want to answer these prompts. How can AI be used to commit plagiarism in an academic setting, and so forth? What did you learn about ethical issues related to generative AI? What did you learn about acknowledging source material and citation? And I'll cover that in a moment. And you're going to write a category 4 or category 5 question this time from Bloom's chart. So in module 1, you wrote a category 2 or 3 question. This time you're going to write a category 4 or a category 5 question that relates to either the Lance article or the Reuters article. But you're going to then answer your own question. This time you're submitting this paper to me, so you don't have peers to look at your question and answer it. So you're going to create the question, because that's an important part of understanding a text, right? Is being able to know it well enough to ask meaningful questions about it. And then you're going to answer your own question. All right. So let's get to some of the details about citing stuff. We're going to start actually with the works cited entry. So there are two things that you have to include in a paper whenever you quote evidence or cite evidence from another source. You have to include information about the source itself in the works cited page, and you have to include some kind of reference to that information up in your paragraph where you actually quote or put that data or that information in your own words. So there will be a reference up here. That's called an in-text citation. Here's actually an example of what one of those looks like. But that actually is pointing your reader to also then say, well, I got that information from this source, which I'm listing down here. Now, the formula that we're going to use for our works cited entries in MLA style throughout this class is going to be, you first list the author's last name, comma, and then their first name. So these are just, blank examples, of made up junk. But we're going to go ahead and write two of them for our two articles that we're focusing on. So I'm first going to do the one that's by Sarah Merkin, the New York lawyers sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT cases in legal brief. And I said I start with the author's last name. And so you should do the same thing on your paper. It's going to go Merkin, that's her last name, comma, Sarah, period. Now, the title gets italicized if it's a long work, like a novel or a film. But if it's a short work, like an article or a poem, then the title gets placed inside quotation marks. So I'm going to delete this nonsense. I'm going to do quotation mark, and I'm going to type the title of the article. New York lawyers sanctioned for using fake ChatGPT cases in legal brief. Boom, like that. Oops, sorry, sanctioned. My bad. Now notice also that I use what's called title case when I'm writing the title. That means the first word in a title always gets capitalized, even if it's the word the or a or as, like an unimportant word. If it's the first one, it gets capitalized anyway. Then kind of the other rule is that all the other important words get capitalized, and the ones that aren't really important words get lowercase. For example, the word for is lowercase and in is lowercase. But all these others are really big important words in our title, and so they get capitalized. So it's kind of a two-rule sort of way of thinking about writing titles and making sure the capitalization gets done correctly. So author's last name, comma, first name, period, and then the title inside quotation marks with title case. The next thing that we need is what's called the container. And maybe it will help you to think of the container as being the organization or the group that published or created the document. So it can be a publisher, it can be a magazine name. If this were a video, it might be whoever created the YouTube video, say, whoever created it, you'd put that name up there, because that is the container or the person that produced the work, or the organization that is like producing and disseminating the work. So this one is written, which one? Let's figure out, what was the organization that did this one? Sarah Merkin did the New York. This is from, the organization is called Rooters. Now, the container gets italicized and is followed by a comma. So I'm going to type Rooters and I'm going to italicize it like that. Follow it with a comma. And then comes the year, and this was published in 2023. And because we're dealing with something that was posted online, the URL comes next. Let's see, here we go. So I pull up the actual website. There it is. So I'm going to copy the URL. I'm going to put that next. And I'm going to type a period and hit enter. Okay. Now notice that this is using something called a hanging indent. This line is way to the left, all the way to the left, and then everything that follows it is indented. If you end up typing your own stuff in and you aren't using like one of the pre-made formulas that have the hanging indent set up for you already, then your indents are going to be off, and you will have to look up how to do a hanging indent in Google Docs. And it's not difficult, but you'll just need to do a quick Google search and find the steps and apply it so that they look like this. Okay? So we just wrote our first works cited article for the first article that we're going to be focusing on. So let's look at the next one. The next one is the artificial intelligence, a tool or threat article. And again, we use the same formula. So we're going to use the author's last name, which is Ree, and their first name. So we separate them with a comma and then a period at the end. And again, we aren't using a novel or a movie title, so this is going to be placed inside quotation marks. So we're going to do artificial intelligence, a tool, or a threat to art and writing, question mark. There we go. And this was published by The Lance. So I'm going to write The Lance is my container, but it needs to be italicized. So I'm going to make it italicized like that. Okay. And then next I need the year that it was published, and that is 2023. And then I'm going to need the URL. So I go back here, I'm going to open it. This is it right here. I'm going to copy my URL over like so. Oops, forgot the period, my bad. There we go. And notice it also has the hanging indent. And then I'm going to delete this one that I'm not going to use. Now, in the course of your writing though, if you end up quoting, and you should refer to some of these other sources, like probably this one, this is going to help you answer question number 1, by the way, this what is plagiarism article, then you need to come over here and follow this, you need to come over here and follow the same formula and input your all that information for your source for your works cited entry. One thing that a lot of people forget about is works cited entries are alphabetized by the author's last name. In this case, M comes before R, so Merkin goes first and then Ree comes next. If I had a work that was written by someone with the last name Adams, then that would go first because A comes before M. So it would be like the Adams source plus then Merkin and then Ree. Okay? So that's a brief little tip for you about, or a brief overview of how to do the works cited page. Let's come up here and let's delete all this junk that they've kind of previewed for us. I'm just clicking and dragging. I'm going to leave the title there and I'll write my own title later. Oh, that reminds me, since I deleted that, look what happened. The works cited page got moved up, and so it's actually on this other page. After you're done typing your paragraphs, however long that's going to end up being, your works cited page should always be on its own page at the end. So don't have like your paragraph for your paper ends here and then you just do works cited on the same page. You'll need to like hit enter and move it down so that it is on its own page with that title right at the top of the last page. So the works cited page should always be separate. Okay. So let's say now that you're answering the questions. You're going to write me a good paragraph for question 1, a nice paragraph about question 2 and 3, and then you're going to do your Bloom's question category 4 or 5 at the bottom again. So you're writing 3 body paragraphs, and it is required that you cite information from your sources. Yes, the questions are asking for your opinion on things, but you can give your opinion in reference to what you've read. So maybe you agree with something that's in the article and you want to then quote part of the article for that, or maybe you disagree with a point of view or an idea that's presented in the article, and so you want to quote part of the article for that. Answering question number 1 talks about how can AI be used to commit plagiarism in an academic setting. Well, for me, the first thing I would do is I would figure out what plagiarism is. So I'd read this and I would probably quote this article and indicate what plagiarism is by quoting that source. I would define it first, and then I would give my opinion. And of course, once I did that, I would have to give credit to this source in the body paragraph, and then I would also write a works cited entry for it. So we've already covered how you write the works cited entry. What do you do, though, to give credit to a source in the body paragraphs themselves? Well, back in our module 2, I gave you a document here that's the citation guide, and if you open that up, it'll look something like this. So when you're writing evidence or giving evidence in your paragraphs, that's called an in-text citation. To cite something means that you are giving credit to the author for those ideas, and in-text means inside of the text. So you're giving credit to the author for those ideas inside of your text. That's the breakdown of that. The very first time that you reference a source, that you give an in-text citation or you give any evidence from a source, you have to use something that's called an attributive phrase. It's also known as a signal phrase. An attributive phrase means I'm attributing this information or this evidence to this specific author. There's a couple rules. First, it's got to be used the first time that the author's name is used or that text is used. And it should introduce the first and last name of the author before the quoted or paraphrased text. So here's an example. According to John Smith, and then I quote directly what John Smith said in that section that I want to use. I put it inside quotation marks because I'm saying this is exactly what John Smith said, end quote, to indicate the end. And then I give a page number in parentheses, and I end my sentence with a period at the end. The period indicates my sentence is over. And so I've got an attributive phrase here because I'm saying this is the person right here, John Smith, who said this stuff. And by the way, you can find it on page 214. That's called an attributive phrase because I'm attributing this phrase, this quote, to John Smith, and I have his name in the very sentence. Now, after I've done that, the very first time that I reference that author or that text, I no longer necessarily have to include the author's name in the sentence. Instead, after that, I can quote the text and I can just place the author's name in the parentheses. So then I can say whatever I want to say from the text. And then I use the author's last name, not their first name, not their first and last name, their last name only. inside the parentheses, and then a space with the page number, and I end it with the period. Okay, so let me do an example. Let's say that I want to reference the Merkin article. Whatever. I'm down here. I'm writing my paragraph, answering the question, and I want to give evidence now from the Merkin article. So I'm going to say something like, according to Sarah Merkin, because this is the first time that I am quoting her and quoting this text, I have to use that attributed phrase, and there it is. And then I'm going to say whatever the text says, end quote. And technically, I should put in a page number, right? Right. But whoopsie daisy, there's no page number because this is a website. According to MLA style rules, here's what you do. If you do not have a page number, the page number doesn't exist, so you essentially pretend like it doesn't exist and you leave it out. I'm just going to end my sentence. There it is. I've given credit to the author right here. Now maybe I say other stuff in this paragraph, and maybe I say other stuff, and maybe later in this paragraph, or maybe even another paragraph, I decide that I need to quote Merkin again. Here I am in my paragraph. I'm going to quote Merkin again. Do I need to say something like according to Sarah Merkin? No, I don't, because according to the rule, after the first time you have the attributed phrase, I can just give the evidence and put her last name in the parentheses. So I might say something like, for example, the article stated blah, 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 baloney, 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 whatever it says. And now I'm going to say Merkin in parentheses. Again, I'm leaving the page number out because I don't have a page number to work with. Okay? Now, if I want to cite a different source, maybe I want to jump to the other source. However, according to, and now I'm introducing a new source, so what do I have to do? I have to use that attributed phrase. According to Ina Ree, blah, 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 blah. And I don't have a page number, so I'm going to end it right there. But later, if I reference Ree, I'm going to say something like blah, 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 Ree, inside the parentheses, end period. Okay? So that's how I give credit to the authors in the text, so I'm not plagiarizing from those authors. And anytime that I quote a source, I've got to come down here and I've got to write a works cited entry for it. One other structural feature that I should point out to you is notice that my paragraphs, they're left aligned with this information, except that first line is indented. If you end up kind of doing something and your paragraphs don't start with the indentation in this format, like they start here and you like end up there, you need to put your cursor all the way to the left and then hit the tab key once, and look, it indents it for you. And then that means that that first line is indented and then everything else is all the way to the left. Okay. Let me come back to the document. Here are some other details. What happens if I have more than one author? We said that for one author, I need to use their first and last name in the attributed phrase. If it's a two-author article, I do the same thing. If it's John Smith and Sam Jones, I'm going to write their names out, and notice that I write out the word and. So, according to Smith and Jones, blah, 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 page 214. Now, if there's no attributed phrase, like if I've already done this part and I'm referencing them again later, that and, which is written, A-N-D, turns into an ampersand sign and goes in the parentheses with them. So it's going to be, oopsie daisy, that comma shouldn't be there. It'll actually be blah, 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 Smith, ampersand, or and Jones 214. Okay. Now, if it's 3 or more authors, whether it's an attributed phrase or not, you use this designation that is et al. Et al is shortened version of a Latin term. I used to know what the Latin term was, and I've forgotten, honestly. It's been way too many years. But what it stands for is what matters. Et al means and all of the others, or and all of the other people. So if I have 3 or more authors, I list the last name of the first author, and then I write et al, which means it was written by Smith and all of the other people. And it might be 2 other people, it might be 25 other people, right? But when there's 3 or more, I don't have to go through the business of writing everybody's name, which would be way too much. Instead, I write the last name of the first person, and I use et al to indicate there's more, there's 3 or more authors here. And so here's the 3 or more author example, again with an attributed phrase. Smith et al stated. Here's what they stated. Here's the page number I got it from. Or after the attributive phrase, here's the piece of evidence, comes from Smith et al, Smith and all those other authors. There's the page number. Okay. A couple other details about that works cited page. I mentioned it should be a page on its own. The words works cited without the quotation marks should be centered at the top of the page. And your entries follow this model. There's the model for you in case you forgot it or you don't want to go through the whole video again to try and hear what I said. All right, we've covered a lot. Module 2 is a busy module in terms of all sorts of different things that you got to learn and got to do. So the short of it is, set up your paper in MLA style. I recommend you use Google Docs. Create a works cited entry or works cited entries for your sources. Use in-text citations when you cite evidence. And answer the prompts. Okay, that's the short of it. I'm going to give you one last detail here. You might go, okay, well, how do I submit my document when it's done? I'm going to show you first what you don't want to do. What students often will do and what you should not do is they'll come into Journal 2-1, they'll scroll down to the bottom, they'll click in the submission box, and I have the instructor side so I can't show it to you, but they'll click there and they will then use the share icon and give me a link to their Google Doc. Do not do that. Why shouldn't you do that? Because I am not allowed to accept a link to a document as an assignment. The student can go in later and update it and go, look, see, you gave me a 35 on this paper, but clearly it's much better than that. And because they went and updated it after I gave them the grade. So I'm not going to accept a link. If you give me a link, I put a 0 in there and I send you an email that says, hey, you can't give me a link. Send me the actual document. And you might go, okay, well, how do I give you a document if I'm using Google Docs? Well, what you need to do is you want to convert this document into either a Word document or a PDF, because Blackboard reads Word documents and PDFs. It's very easy. How do I do that? I go to File, I go to Download, and I choose the document format that I want to download it as. In this case, Microsoft Word .docx or PDF document.pdf, either one. When I do that, I'll use Microsoft Word, say. There, it downloaded it. And then I need to upload that document into the submission box. So when you click in the submission box, and again, it doesn't do it for me because I'm on the instructor view and it's different, you will then have like a bunch of little icons appear, and there will be one that looks like a paper clip. That's the attachment icon. You click on that icon that looks like a paper clip, and you'll be able to choose the file that you just downloaded. It will most likely be in your downloads folder, like mine is right there. Okay. You select it, and then you'll be able to upload that folder and click, or sorry, upload that file and click submit. So that's how you do it. If you have any questions about this, please send me an email. I'm happy to help, and good luck.